I
Cop shoves
understand this is
black girl for
upsetting, but I
lying
need you to
about
tell me
mom.
exactly what
Helicopter
happened.
lands. A black
I
woman
don't
in
know,
combat gear steps out. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask.
We have to
Please
go
hit
in there now
subscribe and
before
turn
they
on the
destroy
notification
everything.
bell so you
We
never
stick to the
miss our
protocol,
channel's new
Captain, or this
videos.
whole
It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It begins on a rainy Tuesday morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a place where most people go about their day without much thought. But for one young girl, that day would change everything. 17-year-old Jasmine had always been quiet, keeping to herself. With her mother constantly working to support their small family, Jasmine had become used to being on her own. Her father, who had been an important part of their lives, had been gone for years, leaving her mother to fill the gap. But recently, Jasmine had been hearing whispers about her mother's past, things she had never known. One particular morning, as Jasmine was walking to the store, she was stopped by a police officer in the parking lot. The officer, a tall man with a stern face, approached her with a question that made her freeze. "What did you say about your mother?" he asked, his tone accusatory. Jasmine was taken aback, unsure of what he meant. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir," she replied nervously. But the officer didn't seem to buy it. He stepped closer, his hand tightening around the edge of his belt. "You said your mother was in trouble, lying about who she really is. I know your game." Jasmine's heart raced. She hadn't said anything of the sort. Yet, somehow, the officer was convinced that she was hiding something. "I'm not lying," Jasmine protested, her voice shaking. But before she could explain, the officer pushed her hard, sending her stumbling backwards. She barely caught herself, pain shooting up her back as she hit the cold, wet pavement. People around them began to stare, but no one stepped forward. The officer was a familiar face in the neighborhood, known for his heavy-handed approach to those he deemed trouble. As he loomed over her, Jasmine's mind raced. She knew her mother had been involved in something far more dangerous than anyone realized, but she never imagined it would lead to a confrontation like this. The officer smirked, sensing his power over the situation. He was about to say something else when suddenly, the roar of a helicopter broke through the stillness of the neighborhood. The sound was deafening, and everyone turned to look. As the helicopter landed in the parking lot, a black woman dressed in full combat gear stepped out, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was tall, powerful, and radiated an authority that made even the officer step back. Jasmine could hardly believe her eyes. The woman walked confidently toward the scene, her gaze fixed on the officer. No one had expected her arrival, least of all the officer. He stood frozen, momentarily stunned by the sudden shift in power. The woman, her face hidden beneath a helmet, approached Jasmine, gently helping her to her feet. "Are you all right?" she asked in a calm, soothing voice. Jasmine nodded, still in shock. The officer, however, was not so easily silenced. He tried to speak, but the woman cut him off with a single word. "Leave," she commanded, her voice like steel. The officer hesitated, then, realizing who she was, took a step back. For the first time in a long while, someone had taken control of the situation. Jasmine felt a sense of relief wash over her, but at the same time, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of something much bigger. As the woman turned to her, Jasmine could sense that she wasn't just here to help. She was here for answers. And Jasmine's life, as she knew it, was about to change forever. I could feel my heart racing as the woman in combat gear helped me up from the ground. My legs were still shaky from the force of the officer's shove, and the cold pavement pressed against my palms. But her steady hands were the only thing grounding me in that moment. The helicopter's rotors faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet buzz in the air. The officer, now standing a few feet away, was still frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. He had no idea who this woman was, but I did. I had seen her before. There was a sudden weight in the air. I had expected the woman to say something to the officer, but she simply turned her attention to me, her helmet gleaming in the dim light of the cloudy afternoon. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice calm but full of authority. I nodded slowly, still too stunned to speak. I had never seen anyone stand up to that officer before. He had a reputation for pushing people around, especially people like me. people who had no power. The woman's presence, though, was something else entirely. She exuded power without needing to say a word. "What's your name?" she asked again, her voice gentle yet insistent. "Jasmine," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded as if she had already known. The officer, recovering from his moment of shock, took a step forward, but the woman immediately raised her hand, signaling him to stop. Her gaze was sharp, like she could see right through him, and he seemed to shrink under the weight of it. "You're going to walk away now?" she said, her tone unwavering. There was no room for argument in her words, no space for negotiation. The officer hesitated, his pride clashing with the sudden realization that he was not in control here. Slowly, reluctantly, he backed away, muttering something under his breath before turning and leaving. I stood there, frozen in place, my body still trembling from the encounter. It felt like a dream. The woman in front of me, who had just saved me from a situation that could have escalated so much worse, was still silent. She was waiting, but I didn't know what for. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I finally said, my voice shaking. She turned to face me fully, removing her helmet. I could see her face now, strong, determined, yet there was something familiar about her. "I'm here to make sure you're safe," she said, her gaze softening slightly. But then something in her eyes shifted, and I could see the seriousness in them. "I need to know everything you know about your mom." Her question caught me off guard. How did she know about my mother? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice rising in confusion. "Your mom," she repeated. "I know she's involved in something big, something dangerous, and I need you to tell me everything you've heard, everything you know." The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. She wasn't asking, she was demanding. But the way she spoke to me, with such certainty and calm, made it hard to refuse. I had been keeping my mom's secrets for so long, things she had never told me directly, but I had overheard her conversations, seen the way she would leave for days at a time, always so secretive. I had no idea what she was really involved in, but I had a sinking feeling that it was worse than I could imagine. "I don't know much," I said slowly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "But I've heard things. Things she's done, things she's been asked to do. I don't know if I can tell you everything, but I'll try." The woman nodded, her expression serious, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Relief, maybe. She could see that I was ready to open up, even if I didn't have all the answers. "You don't need to know everything," she said softly. "Just what you remember, what you think is important." I took a deep breath and started talking, the words coming faster now. I told her about the strange phone calls, the men who would come by the house at night, the way my mother would leave and never explain where she had been. I told her about the times I had tried to follow her, only to be stopped by a man in a black suit who had warned me to stay away. And finally, I told her about the fear I had felt the last time my mother disappeared, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The woman listened intently, her eyes never leaving mine, her expression unreadable. When I finished, there was a long silence. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, as if thinking carefully about what I had just shared. "Your mother is in trouble," she said finally. "And it's worse than I thought." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had known something was off, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. My mom was in trouble, and now it seemed like the world was closing in around her. But before I could ask her what that meant, she spoke again. "We need to find her. Now." The urgency in her voice made my heart race. What had I just gotten myself into? I could feel my hands trembling as I spoke, but there was no turning back now. The woman in combat gear was already on the move, checking her equipment and pulling out a map from a small compartment on her belt. She was methodical, as if this was just another day on the job. She glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable, but I could sense the urgency in her every move. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice firm but calm. "We need to get to her before it's too late." I nodded, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened so far. My mom was in trouble, deep trouble. And now, this woman, who I barely knew, was asking me to help her track her down. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew I couldn't sit back and do nothing. She was my mother, after all. I had to find her. The woman's gaze never wavered as she studied the map. "I've tracked several people connected to this operation," she continued. "Your mother is part of something much bigger than I thought. We have to move fast." I felt a lump in my throat as I realized the gravity of her words. My mom had always been secretive, but I never imagined she could be involved in something this dangerous. I had overheard her talking about her work on several occasions, but she never went into detail. She always told me to stay out of it, that it was too risky. And now, here I was, with this woman, this stranger, who seemed to know more about my mom than I did. Where do we start? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She glanced up from the map, her eyes locking onto mine. We start with the last known location, she replied. The docks. The word hit me like a cold wave. I had been to the docks a few times with my mom, but never at night, and never under circumstances like this. What do we expect to find there? I asked, trying to steady my nerves. I'm not sure, she said, folding the map and tucking it back into her gear. But I know we'll find something. Your mother isn't the only one they're after. My mind raced as I processed her words. They were after my mom. Who were these people, and why were they willing to go so far? The woman seemed to read my thoughts. There's a larger operation at play, she explained, her voice steady but with a hint of something darker underneath. Your mother got caught up in it. And now, they'll stop at nothing to make sure she stays quiet. A chill ran down my spine as I thought about everything my mother had done to protect me. She had always been careful, cautious about the people she associated with. But what if she was in over her head? Are we walking into something dangerous? I asked, suddenly aware of how little I knew about this world. The woman gave me a sharp, assessing look. Yes, she replied bluntly. But we don't have a choice. You're involved now, whether you want to be or not. The weight of her words settled heavily on me. This was no longer just about finding my mom. This was about survival. Let's go, I said, determination filling my chest. We had no time to waste. As we walked to the car, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led to this moment. The officer shoving me, the woman in combat gear appearing out of nowhere, and now, this dangerous mission to find my mother. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't turn back. This was my chance to find out the truth about my mother's past, no matter how dark it might be. The woman led me to a black SUV parked at the edge of the parking lot. The engine hummed to life as we climbed in, the doors locking with a decisive click. We were ready to face whatever was waiting for us. The car sped down the empty streets, the city lights flashing past as we headed toward the docks. I could feel the tension building in my chest with every mile. What if we didn't find her? What if it was already too late? Stay calm, the woman said, her voice cutting through my thoughts. We're going to get her. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. I had to trust her, even though I didn't know anything about her. I had to trust that she would help me find my mother. We pulled up to the docks, the faint sound of water lapping against the concrete filling the air. The woman turned to me, her face hard with resolve. Stay close, she said, and don't make a sound unless I say so. I nodded again, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. We stepped out of the SUV, the cold night air biting at my skin as we made our way toward the dimly lit warehouse ahead. My thoughts raced. Was my mom inside? Were these people still looking for her? And what did they want from her? The closer we got, the more I felt the weight of the unknown pressing in on me. What had my mother been mixed up in? I followed closely behind her, my footsteps echoing in the dark, quiet night. The docks loomed ahead, a maze of rusting containers and shadowed alleyways. I could feel the tension building in my chest, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. The woman, whose name I still didn't know, moved with purpose, her combat boots clicking against the concrete as she led me forward. We reached a narrow path between two large shipping containers, and she stopped, signaling for me to remain silent. I could hear faint sounds ahead, muffled voices, the low hum of machines, and the occasional clink of metal. This was it. We were getting closer. I had to remind myself to breathe. My thoughts were a mess. What were we walking into? Why was my mother involved in this? And most importantly, where was she? My heart was pounding in my chest as I glanced at the woman, trying to read her expression. She was a mystery, focused, professional, and determined, but I still didn't know if I could trust her completely. The closer we got, the more my fear grew. What if we were too late? What if the people after my mom had already found her? The woman signaled for me to stop. She crouched low, peering around the corner of the shipping container. I followed her lead, my hands clammy with sweat. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, I heard the voices again. They were closer now. The woman raised a finger to her lips, signaling me to stay quiet, and slowly, she began to move forward again. We crept along the shadowed path, staying close to the containers, avoiding any open spaces. The dock was like a maze, but she seemed to know exactly where she was going. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the end of the path. There, in the distance, was a large, dimly lit warehouse. The woman motioned for me to stay behind the cover of the containers while she moved closer. I tried to peer around the edge, but all I could see was the faint outline of a group of men standing outside the warehouse. They were talking, but I couldn't make out the words. One of them was pacing back and forth, while the others stood in a loose circle, their voices low. I tried to listen, but the woman pulled me back quickly, her hand firmly on my arm. "We can't risk being seen," she whispered urgently. "They're watching the entrance. We need to find another way in." I nodded, swallowing hard, my mind racing. I had no idea what kind of trouble my mother had gotten herself into, but it was clear now that this wasn't just some simple misunderstanding. These people were dangerous, and I was in over my head. The woman motioned for me to follow her, and we moved along the edge of the warehouse, away from the group. The sound of our footsteps seemed impossibly loud in the silence of the night, but somehow, we made it to the back without being spotted. There was a small door in the back of the warehouse, barely noticeable against the faded metal of the building. The woman crouched down and checked the lock. "This is it," she said softly. "We'll get in here, find your mother, and get out quickly." I nodded again, my heart pounding. I had no idea what would happen once we went inside, but I had to keep going. My mom was counting on me. The woman pulled a small device from her pocket and attached it to the lock. A soft click sounded, and the door creaked open. We slipped inside, and the air was thick with dust and the smell of metal. The interior was dimly lit, the only light coming from a few hanging bulbs in the far corners of the room. I could see large crates and machinery stacked up in the corners, but my focus was on one thing: finding my mother. The woman led the way, her movements careful and calculated. We moved through the maze of crates, the silence in the warehouse suffocating. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness. Our footsteps, the occasional creak of the metal, and the distant murmur of voices from the front. As we neared the center of the room, the woman stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. I froze. Ahead of us, in the far corner of the warehouse, was a small group of people. They were huddled around someone. My heart skipped a beat. Was it her? Was it my mom? I could barely make out the figures in the dim light, but I saw one man standing over the others, his back turned. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and his movements were sharp, as if he was in charge. I didn't know if I could trust him, but something about him felt dangerous. The woman motioned for me to stay low and moved toward a stack of crates near the group. I followed her, my heart racing. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't. I had to see if my mother was there. We crept closer, inching along the crates until we were just a few feet away from the group. My breath caught in my throat as I finally saw her. My mother. She was standing with her back to us, her hands tied behind her. Her face was bruised, and her clothes were torn, but it was unmistakably her. I felt a surge of relief and fear all at once. I had found her, but we weren't safe yet. The man in charge spoke, his voice cold and commanding. "You should have stayed quiet, Elena," he said. "Now look where we are. You've put us all at risk." I stood there, frozen, my heart racing as I stared at my mother. It was her. I could see the faint outline of her figure in the dim light of the warehouse, bruised and battered, but still unmistakably her. My hands shook, and I took a slow step forward, unable to take my eyes off her. I wanted to call out to her, to run to her, but I knew I couldn't. The man who stood over her, the one with the cold, commanding voice, was still too close. His back was turned, but his presence was enough to send a shiver down my spine. My mother's head was lowered, her hands bound behind her, but there was a defiance in the way she stood, a quiet strength that I had always admired. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. We were so close now, but everything still felt so wrong. I could feel the woman beside me, her presence a silent reminder that we needed to act quickly. She motioned for me to stay low, and I did, crouching behind a stack of crates as we continued to move closer. Every step was agonizing. Each creak of the metal crates or shuffle of our feet seemed impossibly loud in the silence of the room. My eyes never left my mother. The man who had spoken to her, He was the one we had to watch out for. I could feel the tension building in the air, like we were all holding our breath, waiting for something to happen. "Elena," the man said again, his voice calm but dripping with something cold. "You had a chance to walk away. Now, you've put us all at risk." My mother's head jerked up, her eyes locking with the man's for a moment. The moment was brief, but in it, I could see something fierce, something untamed. She wasn't broken. Not yet. And that gave me hope. The man stood there, clearly expecting a response. "You think you can keep me quiet?" my mother finally said, her voice hoarse but steady. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step toward her, his face inches from hers. I could feel the anger radiating from him, but my mother didn't flinch. She stood her ground. The woman beside me whispered, her voice low and urgent. "This is our chance," she said. "Get ready." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The woman was right. We couldn't waste any more time. I glanced at her one last time, and she gave me a quick nod, signaling for me to follow. We moved quickly now, stepping carefully around the crates, making our way to the far corner of the room. The man was still focused on my mother, his attention fully on her. My mind raced as we closed the distance. What if he saw us? What if he stopped us before we could reach her? But there was no turning back now. We had come this far, and I couldn't let fear stop me. The woman stopped in front of a large metal crate, pulling out a small device from her belt. She pressed a button, and the device hummed to life. A soft, almost inaudible click echoed in the room, and the crate slowly began to open. My pulse quickened. It was working. We were almost there. I turned back to see my mother once more. The man was still standing over her, speaking in low tones that I couldn't hear, but I could see the tension in his posture. He was losing control, and he knew it. The woman moved toward my mother now, her movements swift and deliberate. I followed close behind, my heart pounding in my chest. When we reached my mother, the woman quickly crouched beside her, her hands working to untie the ropes that bound her wrists. I watched, frozen, as the man finally turned his attention back to us, his eyes widening in realization. "You," he growled, his voice rising in anger. "You should have stayed out of this." But it was too late. My mother's hands were free now, and she stood tall, looking every bit the woman I had always known her to be. "You think you can control me?" she said, her voice calm but full of defiance. The man took a step toward her, but the woman in combat gear was already standing between them. She raised her hand, stopping him in his tracks. "That's enough," she said, her voice cold. The man hesitated, clearly unsure of how to proceed. But my mother wasn't done yet. She stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "You don't get to control me. Not anymore." The tension in the air was thick. I could feel the weight of everything that had led to this moment. My mother had been caught up in something she couldn't escape, but now, she was taking control, and I would be by her side, no matter what happened next. The man glared at her, his fists clenched at his sides. But he didn't move. The power had shifted. It was our turn now. The woman beside me spoke. Again, her voice firm. "We're done here." The man didn't reply, but he knew what that meant. He had lost, and we had won. I could feel the tension slowly ebbing away as the man retreated, his eyes still burning with anger. The woman in combat gear stepped back, her posture strong, her movements precise, like she had done this 1,000 times before. My mother, now standing tall, didn't even look at him. She was focused entirely on the woman who had helped us, the one who had come out of nowhere to rescue her. "Thank you," my mother said, her voice steady. "We don't have much time. We need to go now." The woman nodded without hesitation, glancing over her shoulder at the man who was still watching, clearly considering his next move. The air in the warehouse felt heavy with unspoken words, but there was no time for anything else. "Follow me," the woman instructed, turning sharply and heading toward the back of the warehouse. My heart was still racing, and I found it hard to breathe as we moved, but the sense of relief was undeniable. We were making it out. We were actually making it out. I turned to look at my mom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. This wasn't over, but it was a start. My mother had always been the strongest person I knew, but in that moment, I saw her as I had never seen her before, vulnerable, yet determined. We reached the back door of the warehouse. The woman had already disabled the security system, and the door opened without a sound. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't mind. It felt like freedom. The woman moved quickly, leading us toward the black SUV parked just outside. The engine started as soon as we approached, and I could hear the faint hum of the motor as we climbed inside. The door shut behind me with a solid thud, and the car began to move, its tires crunching against the gravel road as we made our way down the winding path. I couldn't believe it. We had made it. But as the car sped through the empty streets, I realized that we weren't out of danger yet. My mother glanced at me. In the rearview mirror, her face was still pale, but there was a new resolve in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You've seen things now, things that you're not supposed to know. But there's no turning back. You're involved, whether you like it or not." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. This wasn't just about us anymore. We were caught up in something bigger than we could have imagined. "What happened back there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother's jaw tightened, and she took a deep breath. "It's complicated," she said. "I've been working for a group that's not exactly legal. They've been using me for my skills, but I've always managed to keep my distance. Until now. They want me to do something I can't. And when I refused, things got out of hand." I felt a chill run down my spine. What had my mother gotten herself into? What kind of people were after us? The woman in combat gear glanced at us briefly from the front seat. "You don't have to know all the details right now," she said. "But we're running out of time. We have to find a safe place." My mother's expression darkened. "There's nowhere safe anymore. Not for me. Not for any of us." The weight of her words settled heavily in the car. We had no idea where we were going or what we would do when we got there, but it was clear that we couldn't stop now. The woman looked at us, her expression hardening. "We need to get to a secure location. You've made enemies, and they won't stop until they find you." My mother nodded, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "I can't believe it's come to this," she said. "I've spent my whole life keeping things under control, and now it's all falling apart." I wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but the words wouldn't come. How could I possibly understand what she had been through? How could I fix any of this? The woman in the front seat spoke again, breaking the silence. "There's a place we can go. It's not far. We'll be safe there, at least for a while." We all fell silent as the car continued its journey, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I also felt something else. A strange sense of relief. We were moving. We were still alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might just make it out of this. My mother, though still worn and bruised, had not given up. And neither had I. As the car turned down a darkened street, I saw the outline of a building in the distance. We were almost there. Almost safe. I glanced at my mom once more, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. This wasn't the end. Not yet. But we would fight to make sure it wasn't. The car slowed as it approached the building, and I could feel the weight of everything that had happened closing in on us. But we had made it this far, and we would keep fighting, no matter what came next. I sat in silence as the black SUV pulled into a secluded, nondescript building. The area was quiet, tucked away from the busy city streets, hidden behind a chain-link fence and overgrown trees. The car slowed and came to a stop near the back entrance, where a single light flickered, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. The woman driving didn't speak, but her eyes were focused, scanning the surroundings as she parked. She wasn't taking any chances. My mother's face was grim, her eyes distant, but there was something in her posture that made me feel like we were getting closer to some kind of safety. She didn't look at me directly, but I could feel her presence, her mind working through the possibilities. I wasn't sure what this building was, but I knew it had to be something secure. My thoughts raced. The tension from the warehouse, the fear of being caught, had faded slightly, but the uncertainty still loomed over us. We couldn't let our guard down. Not yet. "Stay close," the woman in combat gear said, her voice low but firm. "This place is off the grid, but we still have to move quickly. They'll be looking for you." My mother nodded, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I had always thought of her as strong, unshakable, but tonight, she was carrying something I couldn't quite place. A burden, a weight that only she understood. We climbed out of the car, and I followed the woman into the building. The door creaked as it opened, and the dim light from the hallway illuminated a narrow corridor. The air inside was cool, stale even, as if the building had been abandoned for some time. My footsteps echoed in the silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking deeper into something much larger than I had imagined. The woman led us to a door at the end of the hall, which opened with a soft hiss as she swiped a keycard. Inside was a small, sparse room with only a few chairs, a desk, and a set of monitors along the far wall. The monitors were showing footage of different locations, most of them too blurry to make out. I glanced at my mother, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. She walked past me and sat at the desk, her hands hovering over the keyboard. "I'll need to make a call," she said quietly. "We're not safe yet, but we're getting closer." I nodded, though I didn't fully understand what she meant. How close were we really? And who was she calling? I watched her as she dialed a number, her fingers moving quickly over the keys. The woman in combat gear stood by the door, her gaze never leaving the hallway, always alert. I sat down in one of the chairs, my thoughts swirling in confusion. My mother's call was short, just a few clipped sentences, but I could tell by the way she spoke that she was talking to someone important. The conversation ended with a promise, one that seemed to offer some kind of hope. As soon as my mother hung up, she turned to face me. "We'll be safe here for now," she said, but her tone was cautious. "But we need to keep moving. They know where we are, and it won't be long before they find us." I wanted to ask more, to understand the full scope of what had been happening, but the woman in combat gear interrupted. "It's not just about running," she said, her voice calm but full of authority. "We need to take action. You've seen how far they'll go to get to. Your mother. This is bigger than you realize." Her words hit me hard. This wasn't just a game of hide and seek anymore. People were after us, after my mother. I looked at her, trying to make sense of everything. She was right. We had come this far, but now it felt like we were facing an entirely new threat. I wasn't prepared for this, not in the way I thought I was. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman turned to me, her eyes steely. "Now, we fight back," she said, her words sharp, as if they carried the weight of a decision already made. "But we can't do it alone." I could feel the weight of those words settle in my chest. It wasn't just about getting away anymore. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting for something more. My mother was involved in something far deeper than I ever could have imagined, and it wasn't just about protecting her anymore. It was about all of us, our safety, our future. The woman continued, her gaze never wavering. "We need to contact our allies, get the resources we need. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and we're running out of time." My mother nodded, her face set in determination. "Then let's get to work," she said. And just like that, everything changed. The next phase of this fight had begun. I wasn't sure where it would lead, or how far we would have to go, but I knew one thing for certain. We weren't running anymore. We were taking control. We were going to fight. I sat in the dimly lit room, my hands still trembling from everything that had happened in the last few hours. The woman in combat gear, whose name I still didn't know, was already pacing, making quiet calls, coordinating with someone on the other side. My mother, too, was working, looking over maps, making notes, doing whatever it was she did to protect us. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, the tension thick in the air. The woman's movements were sharp, purposeful, and I could see she was already preparing for what came next. "We need to act quickly," she said, her voice low and serious as she turned toward us. "They're not going to stop looking for you. We have a small window to get ahead of them." My mother nodded, but there was something about her demeanor now that I hadn't seen before, a quiet resolve mixed with an unmistakable exhaustion. The truth of everything was finally catching up to her. "What do you need us to do?" my mother asked, her voice steady, despite the fatigue. The woman paused for a moment, assessing the situation. "First, we need to contact our allies. You've made powerful enemies, Elena. They know where you are, and if we don't make the right moves now, it'll be over before it even starts." I looked at my mom, her face hardening at the mention of enemies. She had been through so much, had lived a life that I never fully understood. But I was beginning to realize just how dangerous the world she lived in was. "Who are these people?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly with fear and confusion. "And what do they want from us?" My mother's eyes flickered toward me, her expression softening just for a moment before she turned back to the woman. "It's not just about us," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It's about something much bigger. I've been involved in operations that, let's just say they've caught the attention of people who would do anything to control what I know." The woman in combat gear stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she processed my mother's words. "You were never supposed to be part of this," she said, her tone grim. "But it doesn't matter now. We're in this together. We'll figure this out." My mother didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked to the table, gathering the papers scattered there. "There's only one way out of this," she said, her voice taking on a cold, determined edge. "We have to take the fight to them." I blinked, surprised by her sudden shift in attitude. "What do you mean?" I asked. The woman in combat gear glanced at my mother, then turned to me. "Your mother has been playing a dangerous game for too long. But now, we're going to turn the tables. We're going to make them wish they never crossed her." I felt a surge of fear and excitement. Was my mom really ready for this? Was I? I didn't know what we were getting into, but I couldn't back down. Now, not when we were so close. "We have to move quickly," the woman continued, pulling out a bag and tossing it onto the table. "This is everything we need. Weapons, communication devices, backup plans. We need to be ready for anything." My heart raced as I looked at the bag. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. I had never imagined my life would involve things like this. But I was in it now, and there was no turning back. "What's the first step?" I asked, my voice steadying. "We need to get to the safe house," the woman said. "It's a secure location. From there, we'll contact our people and make sure everything is set up for the next move." My mother nodded again, her eyes hard with determination. "We don't have much time. The clock's ticking, and if they find us before we're ready, it's all over." I could see the toll this was taking on her, but she was pushing through it. For me, for us. I couldn't help but admire her strength, but I was also scared. How far would we have to go? How much more danger could we endure? The woman's voice broke through my thoughts. "We're ready to move out. Get what you need and meet me outside." I took a deep breath, my nerves a mess, but I nodded. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure we didn't lose. We couldn't afford to lose. As we left the building, the air was thick with uncertainty. But something else was building inside me, a sense of purpose. I was no longer just following my mother's lead. I was stepping into my own role in this fight. It wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving us all. The car sped down the empty highway, the sound of the engine filling the silence between us. I looked out the window, the city lights blurring as we left everything behind. My mother sat in the passenger seat, her eyes focused on the road ahead, her jaw clenched tight. She was determined, but I could see the exhaustion on her face. This had been a long journey, and it wasn't over yet. We were almost to the safe house. The woman in combat gear, who had become our guide and protector, sat in the back, her eyes scanning the road behind us. She hadn't said much since we left the building, but the tension in the air was palpable. We were running out of time. Every minute we wasted put us closer to the people who wanted to find us. I glanced at my mother again. Her hands were gripping the seat, her knuckles white. I could tell she was calculating everything, weighing each decision, but there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. "How long until we get there?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence. The woman in the back seat looked up from her watch. "Not long," she replied, her voice steady. "We need to move quickly once we get there. You'll be safe for now, but we'll need to regroup and make our next move." I nodded, but the doubt lingered. Could we really stay safe? The weight of the last few hours pressed heavily on me. I had always known my mother was strong, but I hadn't realized how much she had been carrying all these years. The life she had kept hidden from me, everything she had done to protect us, was more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The woman in combat gear spoke again, her tone serious. "You need to understand something," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "This isn't just about running. This is about taking control. You're going to have to make hard choices, and you're going to have to make them quickly." My heart skipped a beat at her words. Hard choices? I wasn't ready for this. I had just been thrown into a world of secrets and danger, and now I had to be ready to fight back? "We'll figure it out," my mother said, her voice steady but firm. "We always do." I wanted to believe her, but the fear inside me was still too strong. What if we couldn't figure it out? What if we didn't survive this? The car suddenly slowed, and we turned onto a narrow road leading through a thick grove of trees. The safe house was hidden deep in the woods, away from the prying eyes of the city. It wasn't much, a small, nondescript house, surrounded by high fences and security cameras, but it was enough to keep us out of sight, at least for a while. The woman in the back seat straightened up. "We're here," she said, her voice tinged with relief. "For now, you're safe." We pulled up to the front gate, and the woman quickly rolled down her window, entering a security code on a small keypad. The gates opened with a soft whir, and we drove through, the weight of the outside world slipping away as the gate closed behind us. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. The woman led us inside, her movements swift, precise. "You can rest here for a bit," she said. "But we need to stay alert. The enemy won't give up so easily." My mother nodded, walking into the small living room. The space was sparse but comfortable, with just enough room for the three of us. A few couches, a small coffee table, and a kitchen area in the corner. Nothing luxurious, but it was a refuge. I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was fleeting. The fear that had been gnawing at me since the warehouse was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The woman sat down at the table, pulling out a set of maps and documents. "Now," she said, "we figure out how to bring them down." My heart sank. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and hoping for at the same time. We had to stop running. We had to fight back. "You're ready for this," my mother said, as if reading my mind. She came over and sat next to me. "I know you are." Her words should have reassured me, but the weight of what was to come was almost too much to bear. The woman in combat gear began to lay out her plans, outlining the next steps. We would need to contact a network of allies, people who could help us take down the people hunting us. We would need to act fast, but we couldn't make a single mistake. "You have to trust me," she said, looking directly at me. "We don't have the luxury of making mistakes." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for the responsibility. But there was no going back. This was the world my mother had been living in, the world I had unknowingly become part of. And now, it was my turn to fight for it. The woman stood up, her voice filled with determination. "We're going to end this, once and for all." And for the first time since all of this started, I believed her. In this thrilling chapter of Black Stories, a young girl finds herself thrust into a world of danger and intrigue as she discovers the dark secrets of her mother's past. When the truth comes to light, she must make life-altering decisions that will determine her survival and that of her family. As the story unfolds, alliances are tested and betrayals are uncovered, all while the woman she once trusted becomes her most powerful ally. This intense Black story takes us on a journey through unexpected twists and turns, as the protagonist and her mother fight back against the dangerous forces hunting them down. Their journey is full of action, suspense, and emotional moments that reveal the true strength of the human spirit. As they face overwhelming odds, they must decide whether they can trust the mysterious allies that come to their aid. With every step they take, the stakes get higher, and their survival becomes more uncertain. In the end, this Black story showcases the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, the courage to fight back, and the relentless pursuit of justice. If you enjoy compelling Black stories filled with action and heart-pounding suspense, this journey will leave you on the edge of your seat, eager for what comes next.